Oh, suitcases. I wonder when I'll get to use you guys again. So it's been about 6 months since the family has been anywhere. In fact, we had a beach holiday lined up, but we couldn't go. How did you guys feel about that?
Probably sad because I really wanted to go.
I feel okay because I didn't really want to go to the beach.
Oh, you didn't? Where'd you want to go?
Chicago.
Chicago? Okay, well, I don't know when I can take these kids to the beach or to Chicago. I've been told many times that travel is going to be very different as a result of COVID-19. So, in this episode of Talking Point, I want to find out just how different our holidays are going to be when we can travel again. Analysis released by Pew Research Center on the 1st of April shows that 91% of the world's population live in countries with travel restrictions due to COVID-19. As a result, the number of landings and takeoffs at Changi Airport dropped by 86.6% in May compared to January. We don't know when leisure travel will finally resume, but when it does, I wonder what kind of impact the pandemic will have on the fares that I have to pay. I've learned that it could tip either way. Things like poor demand and low fuel prices might lower airfares. But then again, with more cleaning and social distancing required, prices might go up. However, depending on how quickly low-cost carriers return to the market, that could tip the balance. But I'm no aviation expert. So I arranged to meet with Assistant Professor Terence Phan, who has written many research papers on air transport. Which way would the scale tip?
On average, I would think the prices will tend to be a bit lower as we sort of grow the air travel demand back on.
Can you give me an example of that? I mean, like something we had from perhaps last year compared to this year?
Yeah, so we have this record from here to Japan, in Tokyo and back, in around October last year.
Okay, so I see that's for a JAL flight.
That's correct. So I think last year we're looking at something like $830 plus. If we are going to check the website on Japan Airlines at roughly the same time in middle of October, including all the surcharges compared with the 800 plus, we're looking at almost 40% off.
Yeah, that's quite a significant saving.
Yeah, that's certainly the case.
Is there anything else we should be looking out for?
Many of the airlines trying to schedule as many flights as possible and allow them to go on sale. But when the time comes and then they realize that, the demand actually is much lower than their expectation, then they may actually cancel some of the flights and consolidate the passengers together on the fewer flights. And when they do that, passengers may end up not being able to travel on the dates that they have chosen. So they should be a little bit more flexible.
So in the long run, will we then expect fares to rise overall?
The US has the most sort of comprehensive survey of this type of trends. What we're seeing is that in the depth of the great financial crisis, for example, prices did dip. The same was true also immediately after September 11th. But after that, the airlines also gradually reduced some of the supply of the seats. So after a year or two, we're seeing uptick in prices of about maybe 10% or more in general.
So the good news is that flight prices could dip. But then the bad news is there aren't many places I can start traveling to yet. I discovered a website that provides constantly updated information about travel restrictions. According to TripsGuard, there are at least 16 countries that are open for leisure travelers as of 15th July. The closest to Singapore is Cambodia. We can technically travel to some of these destinations, though the regulations imposed can be dizzying. But even if I travel to those countries, I'll still have to serve a 14-day quarantine when I come back and risk footing my own medical bills. These are to discourage us from going on holidays during a pandemic. But there's no harm in planning for future leisure travel. I've invited David Vu to meet me. He's going to help me figure out how my travel itinerary in a COVID-19 era will look. Oh, hey David. He's been with travel website TripAdvisor for 7 years. I've also printed a list of every single country in the world and highlighted 12 which do not have any reported cases of COVID-19. Are these places I should plan to go to first?
Have people been wanting to travel to these locations?
We've got Samoa, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu. So places like that are known and quite famous for their beaches and being a little bit off the beaten path. We've seen a 60% increase in terms of off the beaten path. Right. And off the beaten track sort of places are conducive to social distancing. And I think our travellers are still favouring the shorter trips.
Do you find people searching for road trips to Malaysia?
It's not so much the road trips, but we did see a big sort of uptick in demand for a trip to Phuket in Thailand, for example, among Singaporeans, which again aligns to people wanting to be out in the great outdoors, be on a beach to relax, and again be able to practice social distancing measures.
So people don't mind flying?
I think it's being on a plane for a shorter time. Flexible booking for airlines, which a lot of them have introduced, is also a key factor in that as well.
What about accommodation? When I'm traveling overseas, what kind of hotels are people looking at? Do they want a place that is near to a hospital, near to the airport, for example, in case they want to leave quickly?
9 in 10 of our travellers have said that a business's ability to report what they're doing in terms of COVID-19 measures is probably the most key priority for them in terms of what they're booking. What we have seen, though, also increase in interest in places like campgrounds, ryokan, sort of more traditional places where it is a bit more socially distant. So people are very mindful of that as well when they're booking.
But when social distancing is not possible, like on airplanes or coaches, how can I travel safely?
Parents change the baby's diapers on tray tables and then leave the soiled diapers in the back of the seat pockets.
You know, this pandemic has brought out the paranoia in all of us. I mean, take a look at this car. It has never been this clean. But what about, say, airplanes? Exactly how dirty are they?
Online trip calculator Travel Math sent a microbiologist to find out the dirtiest places on airplanes. The study found the tray table to be the dirtiest.
Safe travels. These are two words that many of us haven't heard for a while.
Airlines didn't used to publish how often they deep clean the interior cabin, but since the COVID-19 outbreak, many have been documenting how they have stepped up their cleaning. But can these enhanced measures protect me completely on my next trip? Cherie Wong Stewart was a flight attendant for 4 years. Her travel experience has turned her into somewhat of a germaphobe. She's meeting me today to show me how I can protect myself in this new normal. With enhanced safety measures at the airport, we're not able to film on board a plane. But some of her tips apply to road trips as well.
Hey Cherie!
Hello!
Come on board, it's really hot outside.
Alright.
So let's say you are getting on board a plane or perhaps a coach like this. What's the first thing you would do?
I wouldn't touch anything.
Really?
I wouldn't touch anything all the way until I get to my seat.
And what would be the most disgusting thing you've seen on the plane?
I've seen parents change the baby's diapers on tray tables and then leave the soiled diapers in the back of the seat pockets. So I travel light with a bag small enough to store under my seat so I don't have to put anything in the overhead compartment because constantly in contact with a lot of different hands and that's not something I want to be touching.
So what's the first thing you would do when you come to your seat?
I have my cleaning supplies and then I use this kind of alcohol wipe.
Wow, that's like 70% alcohol wipe.
It's way more than just your regular wet wipes. And also a little trash bag for me to just throw all the alcohol wipes that I use in there just so that there's no cross-contamination. Clean the buckle, the strap. Then right over here, the release catch, I would also clean it. Then if we're on a plane as well, then I'll go straight for the little remote touchscreens if I need to, and then I'll clean the tray table, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, in this case here, I can see they've got the grab bars, right? So
Yes,
I'm sure that will.
so clean the grab bars and clean that entire surface in front of you because sometimes when you fall asleep, you don't know what you're touching. If I have the window seat, what I would do is I would also clean that window area because when you're at the window seat, you tend to doze off and you put your head there. And every different surface that I clean would be a different alcohol wipe.
So this works for this chair because it's not fabric.
Yeah.
But on the planes, very often it's fabric, right?
Yes, so I don't want to firstly make the entire seat wet and then have the seat in a wet seat. I recently found this, which is a seat cover. It's light and it's not super pricey. It's probably less than $10. Just put it on top of the seat and then you have the entire clean one. Of course, when you leave, bring it home, wash it, you have a new one for the next trip.
Do people actually think that you're overreacting?
I think before COVID, people thought I was overreacting. Like when I travel with my friends, they're like, you're just being weird. Or when I travel with my husband, he's just like, can you please stop it? But now I think people have started to realize how important it is to keep the space that you're in clean. Because you can keep yourself clean, but you can't keep the person you're interacting with clean. So the best next possible thing is to just keep the area that you will be in for a prolonged period of time clean.
Any other tips for people who are traveling?
When you travel with airlines, just make sure on their headrest they have that little piece of paper, because if they change the paper when they do turnover for flights, then you're not leaning your head onto the same fabric that someone else has done. Another thing that I would suggest would be big Ziploc bag, so I can ensure that nothing really touches the fabric of the back seat pocket. Lastly also is I travel with a bag that is water resistant, so that at the end of the flight I can always put it into the washing machine, wash it.
I should travel with you and you should board the plane before me so you can clean both our seats.
About 415,000 travelers used the land checkpoints daily prior to the pandemic. Up until 4 months ago, Cityline Travel had been operating coaches between Singapore and various parts of Malaysia. But now its owner Desmond Ong has seen his coaches stationary with no journeys to make. There is hope on the horizon though. Singapore will soon also allow some cross-border travel with Malaysia. The reciprocal Green Lane will facilitate travel for essential business and official purposes, while the periodic commuting arrangement will allow Singapore and Malaysia residents to return to their home countries from time to time. Desmond estimates that 30 to 40% of his passengers were Malaysians who work in Singapore.
Desmond, hello.
I want to know what Desmond is doing to kickstart his business once borders open.
What about making sure the bus is clean? What extra steps are you taking?
Okay, come, stay. I show you.
Okay.
Come. We have a fogging team that comes in a van. Our machine and the chemicals are all in the van. The fogging team go to our bus parking space to sanitize the bus.
So how long does the fogging take?
It takes around 2 minutes for the downstairs and then upstairs maybe 3 minutes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
all?
yeah.
So fast, okay.
Desmond invested $3,500 buying 10 of this antibacterial treatment system. It can apparently kill 99% of bacteria, mold and fungi. I now feel more confident about traveling almost germ-free on a coach. And with Cherie's tips, I believe I'll be able to stay safe on a plane. And in these cases, I only need to worry about the space around my own seat for a few hours. But what if I was traveling on board a cruise ship?
So does that mean, yes, you'll be able to pull into the nearest port to offload the infected?
I've discovered how travel on planes and coaches will change as the world grapples with the effects of COVID-19. And one sector that's taken a huge setback is cruises.
A Princess cruise ship carrying some 2,500 passengers is stranded off the coast of San Francisco.
The outbreak on the Diamond Princess cruise ship was suspected to have started with a passenger suffering from a cough. That resulted in more than 700 people being infected on board and 14 deaths.
Cruise ships like the Diamond Princess can have about 3,700 guests and crew on board. Now can you imagine 3,700 people from different parts of the world all mingling intensely in a confined space over a period that could span days or perhaps even weeks? And as we already know, viruses love to run rampant in crowded and confined spaces. Whew.
What's worse, With nations closing their borders, passengers found themselves stranded out at sea. For another ship, the MS Zaandam, a 2-week holiday turned into a month-long nightmare. The number of sick people climbed rapidly, and 4 died on board. On the Costa Fortuna that started sailing on the 3rd of March, a port call in Langkawi was made on the 5th. It was the only time the passengers were allowed to set foot on land during the 1-week trip. The ship was turned away from scheduled port calls in Phuket and Penang in the subsequent days due to COVID-19 concerns, even though it had no reported cases on board. After sailing aimlessly for 5 days, the ship was eventually allowed to dock in Singapore, as it had started its journey here. I've never been on a cruise ship before, but I wonder how the pandemic has changed the way travelers view these floating hotels.
Right now, there are more concerns which I have to think about. One is the health condition, secondly the food.
If one person brings the virus on board, and if it's a short cruise, people leave the ship without it being detected, they go back to their homes all around the world. And it might further escalate the spread of COVID-19.
There's a lot of uncertainties. Is it actually safe? For me, my concern would be, will I actually get infected, and how long will I be quarantined?
The impact on the cruise industry has been catastrophic. According to the Cruise Lines International Association, if suspension of operations continues until the end of August, it's going to cost the industry $64 billion, 428,000 jobs, and $19 billion in lost wages. I'm on my way to meet Michael Goh, the president of Dream Cruises. I want to know what it will take to get people on cruise ships again.
What are precautionary measures that we have been taken on board the ship to provide a safe environment to our cruiser?
And as it turns out, Michael's team is planning to start sailing out of Singapore's harbours again in the 3rd quarter of this year. The Genting Dream used to go on regular voyages to Malaysia and Thailand for up to 6 days, but this time it may be embarking on a 3-day trip that will not be making any port calls. This means the ship will sail only around nearby international waters.
It feels like a risk to start cruising now when the government is only allowing essential travel.
We have to prove to the authority what are the safety measures that we take place to safeguard the passenger safety. For a start, we intend to run at about 70% occupancy. That will allow our guests to have a lot more space. Example that when you go to the theatre, you have less people. They will have 2 empty spaces in between. You go to the restaurant, the food will be served. Our air ventilation system is 100% fresh air, and the air within the ship are not recirculated. Now, we were the first cruise company to introduce the preventive measure, from social distancing to disinfection, sanitization, and so on.
So it turns out that 2 of the company's cruise ships have been housing foreign workers who have recovered from COVID-19. Which means that Michael's team has had the opportunity to learn from health professionals on how to keep people safe and healthy on board.
Have your medical facilities been enhanced in any way?
Now, we had increased the number of isolation rooms. We will increase the number of doctors and nurses. We will have rapid test kit as well as swab test kit available on board the ship.
So let's say there's an outbreak that happens on the ship. How will it be contained?
Now, let me show you in a clearer picture over here. If you look at the layout of the cruise ship, you can actually see the isolation room are also located into this area close to the medical center.
But how far away is this from where everybody else is?
Most of the isolations are actually on the deck 5, and for other cabin, you can see that it's actually from deck 8 onward, right up to deck 18. So it is kind of quite far away from other cabins.
But even on other cruise ships, when they isolated the infected patients, the virus still spread. So how is this going to be any different?
If you look at the few cases that happened before, the passenger have been keeping on board the ship for a long period of time. Our itinerary are shorter. Our ports of call are actually into high sea. So we can actually return back into Singapore very fast.
A few months back, several cruise ships were stranded at sea because they were unable to call into any port because they had some infected passengers on board. Could this happen here too?
It was a time that many countries do not know a lot about COVID-19. So there's a lot of concern and a fear. Now there's many new discovery and certain protocol and arrangement has been made. We engage a lot with the port that we use and the local authority to facilitate this when we reopen the business.
So does that mean, yes, you'll be able to pull into the nearest port to offload the infected?
Yes, that will be the arrangement that, in our standard operating procedure.
Well, I guess cruising the high seas is not an option I will consider soon. But there is one other alternative I can look into. Hotels in Singapore are now open for staycations.
But what will my staycation look like? I'm about to find out. I have to mask up at all times, except when I'm eating, in the pool, or working out at the gym.
So an online check-in minimizes the time I spend in the lobby, where everything from the countertop to the pens and even my key will be sanitized. Thank you.
There's safe distancing at all common areas.
So I can't seem to find any printed material about hotel services or even the menu. But I can get them by scanning this QR code here. Great, thank you. Restaurant buffets as we know it are a thing of the past. These days, buffet items are cooked on the spot when you order them, and the cutlery even comes wrapped up in a napkin.
To reduce physical interaction with hotel staff, I now use chatbots for questions that I have as a guest.
And of course, a staycation for me also involves time at the pool and at the gym, both of which are open to guests.
At the Grand Hyatt, gym guest capacity is halved, and every alternate equipment is marked out. As soon as someone hops off the machine, it's sanitized. Holidays in the future is certainly going to be different from what we're used to. But the good news is that cleanliness seems to be the top priority, which is reassuring. In the meantime, to cope with the stress brought on by the COVID-19 outbreak, I'm going to unwind. And this is probably the closest I'll be getting to my beach holiday.